Welcome back. As lawyers for former President Jacob Zuma continue with their preparations for his arms deal corruption trial, they have since written to a number of organizations, 11 in total, requesting information that may assist them, they say, to mount a credible defense strategy. So far it's emerged that although the letters of request were sent to at least 11 organizations, the Nelson Mandela Foundation and the ruling ANC top the list. You've heard that was confirmed earlier on by a spokesperson for the Jacob Zuma Foundation, Mzwanele Manyi, speaking to us earlier on. We speak now to Paul Holden, who's a Shadow World Investigations researcher. Very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us, Mr. Holden. So, just your thoughts around these developments, the timing thereof. There is nothing sinister, says Mr. Manyi. It has all been because of the toing and froing with the legal process. I'd like to hear your thoughts to that response.
I think there's a couple of different responses here. The first is that it strikes me as incredibly strange that you have somebody who's been charged on these charges for an incredibly long period of time across multiple indictments, to wait until this point in the proceedings to decide to get evidence that might exculpate him and allow him to mount a defense. It seems to me that, if I was accused of a crime 10 years ago and I thought there were documents that would get me off, I would be getting them 10 years ago. I wouldn't be getting them right now. And I genuinely think at this point that we have to ask questions about whether this is a political tactic, and that the former president is sending a message that if you pursue this matter, I will embarrass the ANC and I'll embarrass former leaders of the ANC. And this is another last-ditch attempt to avoid prosecution as a result.
Just the kind of information that he is seeking and the timeline. We have heard from Mr. Manyi that it is just simply information that they need to corroborate certain things, that it's not necessarily to implicate any third parties, that if everybody is as innocent as they claim, then all it is information. He says this blocking that seems to be happening is, a travesty of justice, as the former president is being denied the information. I want you to talk us through what is being asked here, the proof on donations that have been made by certain individuals, including former President Nelson Mandela. How can it be exculpatory evidence in his defense?
Well, that's another thing that I'm trying to understand, and I really can't at this point, because it's not a defense to say, well, maybe I was corrupt, but other people were corrupt as well. It doesn't excuse a person's misconduct or wrongdoing. It's very clear if you read Jacob Zuma's charge sheet that it has nothing to do with Nelson Mandela. It has nothing to do with other third parties. It's about the fact that he made an agreement with an arms company in France to protect it from any investigations for any ongoing corruption investigations. And there's an encrypted fax that was sent by that arms dealer, by the arms executive, that stipulated this fact, and the money was paid. And that's the nature of the corruption charge. I really understand how these matters fall within the ambit of his trial at all, unless he's planning to argue that other people were more corrupt than him, which I don't think he can possibly do, which leads me to believe that it is a tactic designed to create as much political pressure as possible. And we should remember that when Mr. Zuma was first charged a number of years ago, he said very publicly, first, I want my day in court, which is he's obviously sought to avoid as much as possible. But second, he said that once he goes to court, he will expose all sorts of different people. That's always been his backup line, that if he is prosecuted, he'll take people down with him. I don't think this evidence would allow him to do that, and I don't fully understand how it would help this trial.
Let me latch on to that, Mr. Holden, precisely because the country is going through this process of the state capture inquiry, trying to understand just how big, wide, and how far it goes back. Is it implausible that the late President Nelson Mandela may have had a direct role in influencing who was to get some of the tenders on the table at the time, given his position? We're told that the former president chaired most of these meetings where these arms deals were brokered. And from the letter that Mr. Zuma's lawyers have written to these organizations, they seem to talk about donations or payments which may be cast in the light of dodgy or impropriety?
I mean, I think it's difficult to know for certain. I mean, what they're asking for in relation to Nelson Mandela in particular, and this has been very well known for a very long period of time. I think the first stories about this came out, if I'm not mistaken, at least in 2008, maybe 2009, that there was an agent who was connected to a particular arms company who made donations to the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund. Now, that I think, is actually very problematic. But there's no evidence showing that Nelson Mandela knew about that donation, and there's no evidence to show that he intervened directly to make any procurement changes. Now, there's a lot of misunderstanding about how the arms deal was pursued. At the head of the arms deal process was a cabinet subcommittee that oversaw the whole arms deal. And that cabinet subcommittee was President Thabo Mbeki, the finance minister at the time, Trevor Manuel, Alec Irwin, and Stella Sakha. And those were the key people who led the whole arms procurement process. Underneath them were people like Chippy Sheikh, who is, of course, the brother of Shabir Sheikh, with whom Jacob Zuma is alleged to have a corrupt connection with. I've been investigating the arms deal since 2007, and I've mentioned the fact that these donations were made and said I'd like to see some clarity around them, but I've never personally seen evidence that Nelson Mandela himself is corrupt. I have, however, seen incredible amounts of evidence showing that Jacob Zuma has a case to answer, along with a number of other people.
And would those be the people that you have just mentioned? Because the former President Jacob Zuma's lawyers say that he is reluctant to expose these files as it would ultimately tarnish the image of the ANC for good. However, it is stated that this tactic is unavoidable, if one is to call it a tactical strategic action. What are your thoughts on this? And you've mentioned quite a number of names. Have those people been implicated? And I want to also look at the list of names that I mentioned: Yusuf Surti, Mr. Bill Fenter, and there's also Tony Georgiades. Are these names that have been, shown red flags in the investigations you yourself have done?
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's a huge amount of evidence of corruption in the arms deal. I've written 2 books on the arms deal. I try to present evidence to the SABC Commission of Inquiry alongside my colleagues, trying to point out this evidence of corruption. This is incredibly well known. It's been investigated in Germany, it's been investigated in the UK. Vast amounts of bribes were paid in this particular deal. So none of those names are a surprise to me. What I find very concerning is you have the former president of the country who is saying that I knew about this corruption. This is what he's saying, that I knew about this wrongdoing. It was embarrassing, and I've waited until this moment to do something about it. If that's true, that is also a violation of the Prevention of Corruption Act. If he knew there was corruption that took place, it was his duty to report it. He can't then rely now on his own defense. That's an absurd argument.
Thank you so much for speaking to us, Paul Holden, Shadow World Investigations researcher.